I think. Everybody see the PowerPoint okay?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All right. So I thought we'd start tonight, just give you a chance to share. I typically like to do that throughout the course and the classes. So you had a chance to read your first textbook. It's not a long one, from topic to thesis. So I was wondering what did you gain the most from this book? How do you, what was your view of it, and what's your takeaway, basically? So someone want to start tonight, just get the ball rolling, something that you learned from reading the book?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I learned that I should not come to the research process having already decided what my paper is going to argue. In other words, I think I've already made up my mind, and too rigid. So Kibbe basically says, no, hold on to those things loosely, but enter into it that way, and that should help us. And he said that biggest mistake that I can make is to decide too much too early. So I thought, okay, that's a good lesson. I shouldn't do that, and I should just. So yeah, so that was my takeaway, a major one.
Yeah, so it's a little bit opposite of the way that we're used to thinking in terms of doing research papers, where a professor will give you a research topic, and so then you go to try to find those journal articles or books that relate to your topic. You read those, and then you write your paper. And so it's a little bit different because, especially if you have not narrowed down your topic, right? We talked last week about topic selection and how difficult that can be, sort of like going to the grocery store and having 50 different types of cereal to pick from. And it's easy to have that indecision, especially if you've never tasted any of those cereals. You don't know what they taste like. And so that's really what we're talking about here, in terms of trying to decide what you're going to write on. And this is a big decision because, as we said before, it's something that you're going to live with for really the next 4 years. You want to find something that you're very interested in, something that's going to benefit you, your church, and or ministry. So you have to think about that as well. Okay, somebody else?
I would like also to share a little bit on what I found that like most important thing that I've learned is about the research subject, where he's talking about that the theological research, it is necessary an act of confession. A confession that you do not deserve to know God, but confession that you are a human and therefore you are limited in your ability to understand him. So I found that most of the theological research, there is an aspect of spiritual aspect also. Something that I've learned in the book.
We talk about scholarship and humility, as you were emphasizing there. Again, the more you research on a topic and the more you see what other people have written on a particular topic, the more oftentimes you realize how much you really don't know. And you come to understand the the theological discussion on a particular topic in a way that maybe that you've never seen it before. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I enjoy being a professor at a university is learning, hearing new ideas, listening to lectures, reading different books that those who are viewed as scholars, and just seeing what they have written on different texts in the Bible, as well as different theological topics or doctrines, contemporary issues. So, yeah, so we all have room to learn and to grow, and we have that attitude, which the book emphasizes, especially as it relates to God. I think there's the joy of discovery. We talk about this in inductive Bible study, when person learns how to study the Bible for themselves. But I think it also applies to writing a dissertation, the joy of maybe figuring something out for the first time.
Yeah. I've also learned. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, just, yeah.
I've also learned about the distinctive natures of a topic and a thesis. A topic is a set of information that concerns a specific thing, and he says a thesis is a specific claim that a research writer makes about a particular set of information. The research process, he pointed out that is a movement one makes from identifying that set of information, which is a topic, to making an argument about that set of information, the thesis. So a research paper, he said, will not merely be about the topic, but will make a specific claim about a particular issue within the topic. So that was a very important lesson for me. And the other point was the fact that he said the research paper must have a persuasive nature, which means I have to keep in the back of my mind the reader, and always making sure that I will present, I have to present a very solid biblical argument. So implicitly, I kind of said to myself, when I go into this research writing project, I have to consider as if I'm going to a school where I see myself as a student to learn a lot from the books I'm going to read. So my knowledge will be sharpened. And at the same time, to see myself sitting and kind of explaining my argument to the listeners. I think at one point he says, it's just like, you go into a coffee shop where people are sitting together and having conversation, and you see yourself going there and trying to understand what they say and be part of that conversation. So that was a very important lesson for me. But another emphasis that I gave, I really like that the book reminded us that not to forget about whom we're serving, to have that attitude and make sure that we always do the process of research writing with a spirit of prayer and humbleness. Humbleness, so that we'll be blessed by it, by the Lord. So that were some of the points that I wanted to share. Thank you.
Yeah, sometimes PhD students can feel lonely, okay? Because you're in a library with your books or you're in your study with your books. And those involved in ministry, full-time ministry, pastors especially, know the importance of being alone for personal time of study and reflection. But you can't do the ministry, pastoral ministry, alone. You have to be with people, and that whole idea of the theological conversation is something that hopefully you could pair up either in this course or with some other PhD students to share the whole process. So sometimes you gain insight not just by studying, reading books by yourself, but by talking to somebody about a topic. And as you are learning to express your ideas to someone else, especially somebody who is going through the same process, there's sharpening of your ideas, and you'll find that you'll have a better product in the end, I think, if you could talk to somebody about what you're studying. So for me, because I taught Ephesians, I had studied Ephesians myself. I had been a grader at Dallas, sort of a tutor to students, and our topic of discussion was Ephesians, the Greek text of Ephesians. So I had done a lot of preliminary work on my topic book. For me, it was Ephesians. And then when I came to Baptist Bible Seminary, I was teaching that course for 19 years, starting in 1998. So I was every year teaching it, going through the arguments. So there's something to be said about not only conversing with someone or more than one person about your topic and talk about things that you're reading and studying, but if you have opportunity to use your topic in some way, even in ministry, you're going to find it, it's like anything. You study the Bible for yourself, it's great, but if you study the Bible to share the results of your Bible study with somebody to help them grow spiritually, it's even better. So I think hopefully you understand where I'm coming from on that, in terms of your own understanding on a particular topic. Karis?
I think I was really impacted. He talked about how everything in your paper has to point towards the thesis that you're trying to make. So to be really ruthless with, like, it might be interesting, but if it doesn't support your points, to cut it out. And I was also really impacted by the things he said. I think it was in the first chapter, which you guys have already mentioned, but I've written them on my fridge. But about, like, confess the fact that you don't deserve to know anything, but God has made himself known through Jesus, and that we have the Holy Spirit, who's like the spiritual expert. And so to really listen to him rather than just plow through in academic style, but to really spend time in prayer and listening to what he has to say. So
that's good. I mean, if you're way ahead of the game in the starting up this process by thinking through some of the spiritual dynamics of scholarship here, which oftentimes are not discussed, but I'm glad that he brought it up in the book. Well, we'll come back and talk maybe some more about KIB and some things. I appreciate the 10 points that you each shared in your paper. So we've talked a little bit about topic selection and narrowing your topic. Now the next step is reading your sources. All right, so we've talked about different types of sources, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Now the process of reading. So what you're going to be doing the next few weeks, sort of the meat of this course, is you're going to be finding sources and you're going to be reading sources. And you're going to start your research bibliography. That's going to be your number one priority. following Turabian style format. And then, as we talked about last time, you're going to take those sources and turn it into a annotated chronological bibliography. So actually 2 different documents. One Word document would be your research bibliography. The other is taking those and putting them in the chronological order of writing. And when you begin your reading of these sources, you want to try to read them in chronological order, if at all possible, right? So, yeah, finding sources, reading sources. We're going to talk about some things about that you need to consider. So we're starting with the primary sources, and of course, we're starting with the Bible. And so as you think about your particular topic, and if it comes from a particular book of the Bible, Old Testament or New Testament, you want to think about reading and translating that book. If it's from the Old Testament, you're going to look at the Hebrew text. If it's from the Greek, if it's from the New Testament, you're going to read the Greek text. And so start there. Start with reading that book in the original language. And maybe you have a commentary with you as you go. But that's something you can do in your devotional time, right? You can take a verse or two and do a little reading and translating and parsing and all that. So we'll be talking about different sources to read and study, but these are some ideas when you're reading your books. If you own the book, to write notes in your books. Don't be afraid to write notes in your books. Or if you have a notepad or a computer where you want to write down your key points, if you have your annotated bibliography and as you're reading, you may want to just have your laptop there and just type in your summary and or your views as you go. So you can go back and just later on, like 2 or 3 years down the road, you can, rather than having to go back and read that source all through again, you have a little bit of idea of what's there that relates to your topic. But as far as making notes in your books, and I do this in my outlines and things like that when I teach, put a star by sections that are important that I want to emphasize, especially. For instance, in the margin of your book, you might write down the topic of that particular section if it's not clearly stated in the book itself. You could also write agree or disagree. So that's often helpful too, because you can sort of flip through a book and see, what are the areas that you disagree with the book, because maybe that's what you would want to comment on. Another thing that you can do is connect sources. For instance, link one source to another. So in one book, you read about a topic and then you write, well, see Calvin Institutes, page 50. For more comment on that, say the person mentioned Calvin, but you often can find some links to sources there in the footnotes, of course, if the author is carefully citing sources. If you come across key sections of an argument, you can either underline or highlight if you like to use a highlighter. But these are just some different ideas. Don't be afraid to mark your books and or set up your system, whether it's writing on 3x5 cards, stacking those, or just typing into your computer under your chronological annotated bibliography. So we talked about primary source, starting with the Bible. There are other primary sources we'll talk about, but the secondary sources talk about scanning the table of contents, reading the introduction. You're going to be looking for dissertations and books this week. All right, so the goal is to find 30 dissertations or books on your topic. That's the goal this week. So you're not going to have time to read all these things this week. You are going to be doing some reading, though. And so you read KIV this last week. This week you're reading some dissertations and books on your topic. So the goal is a minimum of 300 pages from these sources. And so you're going to have your research bibliography as one document. And the second document will be your chronological annotated bibliography. You're going to try summaries of your sources. You can write down your views, whatever, on each source. And of course, you'll be answering the question, the weekly discussion question there. So you might want to identify the type of source. Is this a primary source? If it is, you could highlight that and come back, because those are going to be the key books that you need to read and study. You might want to use 3x5 cards and put the topic or subtopic at the top of the 3x5 card. Put the source, title of the book or journal article, the author, page number. You can use 3x5, 4x6 cards if you want something a little bit bigger. But make note of any views or arguments if you'd like to write on a card. And then the advantage of cards is that you can stack them when it comes time to, sort of put them in different sections. It makes it for a nice way to use the cards. And you can put them in stacks for the different chapters and sections of your dissertation. So you go back and begin to read and begin your writing. You'll have it stacked in your stacks, the sources that relate to your different chapters in your dissertation. Well, you're going to need to devote some time, blocks of time, to read sources. Let me recommend, because we live in an age of distraction, that you set aside at least 1 hour a day to read without stopping, okay? That means no Facebook, no phone, right? 1 hour a day minimum. If you're able to do more, that's great. But, reading is different from finding sources. So finding sources is a different task. Reading is the second step after finding your sources. I mean, you can find the sources, then you have to, if you go to a library, you have to check them out. You have to, if you find a journal article or whatever, you can print it out if you want it in a hard copy. But yeah, you got to find your sources. You got to put them in your research bibliography. And then reading is just, blocking out times to read this source and making your notes and some of the things I just mentioned. Keep track of what source you've read. You're not going to have time to read all of them, not just in this course or even later, but that's why you keep looking for and finding resources that relate to your topic throughout the rest of the program here at Calvary. Avoid distractions. Again, find a time where it's quiet. So, it's difficult to read and watch your children at the same time. So if you have little children or whatever, it's difficult. So you have to find some time maybe when they're taking a nap or get up early or something like that. So read only the sections of the sources that relate to your topic. Again, this takes a little bit of discipline, because if you find a book or article, it's tempting to want to read outside of your topic, which is okay, but you really don't have time. You have to really sort of limit yourself to read the sources that relate to your topic and sections of sources that relate to your topic. So you read the tertiary sources to discover what secondary sources to consult. So the secondary sources are like commentaries. See, a commentary is a secondary source. The Bible in the original language, a primary source. So if you're translating, for instance, for me, it was translating the Greek text of Ephesians, and identifying the verbs and participles, and understanding the how the argument is structured in the book. So any commentaries I had on Ephesians, those are secondary sources. And so you read the secondary sources to understand the key issues, problems, interpretive issues in your primary sources. So a good commentary is going to be one that deals with interpretive problems in a book and gives you possible options, and then argues for one of the interpretations, validates the correct interpretation. You want to check footnotes in tertiary and secondary sources to find other sources to read. And when you find those sources, you want to add them to your research bibliography. That's where it starts, is developing that. You're going to be doing that throughout the weeks of this course. So that's the goal. It's time to get going on that topic and finding dissertations and books this week. Next week, just to show you how the assignments fit together, it'll be journal articles and electronic resources. All right, so that's next week's assignment. So this week is not journal articles. This week is dissertations and books. And you want to look at ProQuest there in Canvas for dissertations. And then in week 4, you're going to begin reading the book by Craig Evans, Ancient Texts for New Testament Studies, and see if how that relates to your topic. Okay, so just to see where we're going with the sources here. Well, here's some questions to ask as you read these various sources. So who are the scholars who've written on the topic? All right, just sort of make your list. And what are the books, right? You can sort of go through your research bibliography. You'll find out who are the key people. What are the books they've written? What are the key issues or debates in this topic? So just, again, some things to have, like a yellow pad, maybe with these questions, and you come across a debate, and you could write that in, and you could put the source where that debate is found. It will help you with your initial research. What questions are being asked by scholars? You're going to eventually come up with your research questions for your dissertation. And your research questions are the questions that you want to delve into. It's really going to help you come up with your thesis and argument. The argument for your thesis will be reflected in the chapters of your dissertation, right? So the chapters of your dissertation, sort of like the skeleton of the dissertation, the argument, and then the points that you develop will be answering the research questions that relate to each one of the chapters. Different views on the topic, debates, different views, the main arguments for the different views. So, for instance, if you were writing on different views of Hebrews 6, you would want to find out, who's written commentaries on Hebrews, and what are the different views and how they relate to, for instance, Calvinism versus Arminianism debate. So what questions are being asked and what answers are being given by the scholars. So you have the questions that are being asked on the topic, but what answers are being given. So that's those are two key things. And again, as you think about narrowing your topic, and again, this may take some time to narrow it down, which will then lead to your thesis. What areas of this topic am I interested in the most? All right, so you might have, like, for instance, John's interested in 1 Samuel, or 1 and 2 Samuel, and then he said this week he's thinking about the Messiah in 1 Samuel, so that narrowed it down. There's a lot of different topics in 1 Samuel. You could have the Ark of the Covenant in 1 Samuel, or the role of the prophet Samuel in 1 Samuel. So you have different topics in a particular book. Key concepts and definitions, key theories or models or methods. These are just words to think about as it relates to your topic. What still needs to be researched? Sometimes you'll come across a dissertation or thesis, and they'll actually mention an area and said, if I had more time, I would research this. And the idea is that that dissertation for you will be like a sign that sort of points you in a direction that maybe you had not thought about before. And so that may lead you down a road where you're going to find some very interesting things on your topic. More questions. Which sections of the primary source relate to your topic? So in Ephesians, there's a lot of topics. We'll talk later about biblical theology of Ephesians. I'll share a little bit with you. So how do you narrow it down? Well, making a list of the topics in your primary source is a good way to start. All right. So again, as you're reading through 1 Samuel, maybe sort of list through, what the different sections of the book are all about. If there's any key individuals, key people, key interpretive questions, you just begin to make a list. I do that when I'm preaching or teaching through a book of the Bible. I just sort of make a list of questions. It's often helpful to look at study guides to on different books of the Bible and see what are the questions that are being asked in the study guide. Some questions are observation type questions. So you ask, like I tell the guys for preaching and teaching, you ask an observation question. The answer for that question, the observation question, is found in the text of Scripture itself. All right, so you ask a question, you find the answer in the Bible. That's an observation type question. The interpretation question relates to the meaning of the text. We believe there's only one meaning, the contextual meaning, right? And so observation text finds the answer in the Bible. Where did Moses receive the 10 Commandments? Mount Sinai, right? So one answer to that question is found in the text. Interpretation, there might be debated interpretations. I mentioned Hebrews 6. What's the correct meaning of the warning in Hebrews 6? Well, there's different interpretations and different arguments for those different interpretations. I've got a book right here. It's called 4 Views on the Warning Passages in Hebrews. So it covers Hebrews 6, but it's looking at all the warning texts in Hebrews. And you've got the classical Arminian view, Grant Osborne. You have the classical Reformed view, Buste Fanning. The Wesleyan Arminian response, Gareth Cockrell, and a moderate Reform view, Randall Gleason. So each one of them wrote a chapter, and then they had to respond to each other. They wrote a response to each one of their different views. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about in terms of a text of scripture that's debated, where you find different views, and you got a whole book here where you need to not only just study the text for yourself, but you need to look and see what other people have said about the text to enter into the conversation. So I need to read a book like that to really understand how scholars have approached Hebrews 6, not just Hebrews 6, but all the warning passages of Hebrews. One in Hebrews 10, I know. So the issues on the topic, arguments that you could make from your primary sources and come from your own interpretation there of the text. Well, questions to ask secondary sources. Does this source explain key sections of the primary source? Of course, the commentary does that. Is this a scholarly source? We're going to talk about different types of commentaries a little later on. But you have different levels of scholarship and different audiences. So not every book is written for a PhD audience, right? Those who are at the highest level of academia. So you want to think about this. You're in a PhD program, you're writing for a PhD audience. You got to keep that in mind, right? So I'm not saying that you could take that dissertation and you could turn it into some sermons or Bible study lessons or whatever for your church. I'm not saying that you can't do that. What I am saying, though, is you just can't take a Bible study session for your church and turn it into a dissertation. That's what I'm saying. It's not going to fly. It has to be at a certain level of scholarship to be accepted as a PhD dissertation. So there's different styles of writing that you can do for writing a sermon versus writing a dissertation. Those are two different styles of writing. Does this source deal with one or more issues in your topic, the secondary source? And does it point to other secondary sources? So, for instance, some of my commentaries, let's see. Here's one. Clinton Arnold wrote on Ephesians, right? So commentary is really written after my dissertation, but I like this series because it deals with the original text. But trying to see if they have any. There's an author index at the back of the book. All right, so they have an author index, but they don't list. They just have the author and the page number where they're referenced. So you have to actually go to the footnotes to find the bibliography in this particular commentary series. And so, because I've taught Ephesians, I know Honer's book on Ephesians, O'Brien, Robinson. These are some of the people who've written on Ephesians. Just mentioning some of the commentaries on that.
Household names.
Yeah, commentaries are secondary sources. So I mentioned this already, but what positions do the different authors hold on the topic? Where's the discussion going today? For instance, a debate on lordship salvation versus free grace. Is anybody writing on that topic today? Who's defending lordship salvation today? We're all familiar with John MacArthur, The Gospel According to Jesus. Zane Hodges wrote a book called Absolutely Free in response to that book. And Ryrie wrote So Great Salvation. So if you want to understand the free grace versus lordship salvation debate, you really want to start with those 3 books written in the 80s. And of course, there's other books that have been written on the topic. And hopefully you'll interact with those when we get to that in theological analysis too. Well, the tertiary sources, of course, are commenting on the secondary sources. And again, who are the key scholars, books, journal articles, problems to be solved? Well, let's look at a few common research mistakes. And we see this at the master's level, but really inexcusable at a doctrinal level. Using devotional commentaries rather than exegetical commentaries. So at the PhD level, you should be referencing and using exegetical commentaries. These are commentaries that are making comments on the original text, the Hebrew Bible, the Greek New Testament. So those are the kind of commentaries you should be referencing in your dissertation. Wikipedia. I talk about this a little bit at the master's level. Really should never be seen as a source in your bibliography for any master's or doctoral level paper. Now, Wikipedia may contain secondary or tertiary sources, and Wikipedia may lead you as a tertiary source to secondary sources to consult. But you don't want to cite it. It's sort of like a journal article or book that quotes another author who's written another book. You don't want to quote the secondary source. You want to go and quote the primary source where the quote actually came from. So it takes a little bit of mining. So one author is quoting another author. You don't quote the first author, you quote the second, the one that he mentioned, and the place where the actual quote came from. And if the first author is a good writer, he's going to put that in a footnote. He's going to reference that source in a footnote with the correct bibliographic reference. Everybody follow me on that? We're looking at common research mistakes. Another one, using sources that you agree with, only sources that you agree with. Now, at the PhD level, you should be looking at people that you agree with, but again, let's go to the illustration that Kib uses and that I like to use, the theological conversation at the table. So it's fun to be at a table where everybody's in agreement on a particular topic, especially if you're trying to make a decision that impacts everybody. Much more difficult, but maybe more lively, to be in a room where you have scholars who disagree on a topic and express their different views and different interpretations, and you have to listen carefully, because especially if you haven't read their books or read the people that they've read. You understand what I'm saying? You're really sort of in the dark, because they've read all these different people that you've never even heard of, or you've never even seen their books. But the reading that they've done has impacted their view, and that's the reason why they hold their view, because they've looked at the arguments of these books that you've never read. So, yeah, don't be afraid to read books that you disagree with. And you're going to find that be really stimulating too, because especially to get into different theological perspectives, you can then interact with them in your dissertation. You want to be fair in quoting them, but then you can interact with their arguments and their interpretations. And so reading and critically evaluating arguments in their books and journal articles can be a real great part of your dissertation, and one that people will find very interesting if they read it. Notice I said if they read it. Using only one type of source. So we've talked about using only sources you agree with. The next one is using only one type of source. Well, you want to have a variety of sources. And that's what we're going to be doing in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Commentaries, journal articles, dissertations, master's theses, monographs, dictionary articles, a variety of sources. You have to learn from Turabian how to reference those in your bibliography to do the correct form. Do the correct form now. You have to do it, make changes later. Better to do it now. Do it once and do it right. Okay. So if you have question, go to Turabian. Hopefully you have Turabian. You can reference that. We have a Turabian style guide, but it doesn't cover everything. Turabian, there's also the Chicago Manual of Style that's sort of related to Turabian as well. Well, failing to consider all sides of the topic, in the end, what are the debates? What are the debates having by your scholars on your topic, and what are the different views? If you find some different views, that's going to help you to go down and find sources that relate to that and interact with their arguments. All right, before our break, let's ask a question and see if we can come up with an answer. But before we do that, I want to see if you had any questions or comments on what I shared first, and then we'll talk about this question here. But we've talked about here in the first hour, reading your sources, different ideas for doing that, taking notes, writing agree, disagree in the margin, finding the secondary sources that comment on your primary sources, devoting blocks of time for reading, different questions that we need to be asking in our reading. And we looked at some common research mistakes. So any other comments or questions about that?
I have a question on the assignment of this week because I'm seeing that in my side I've put a list of books. Now I'm going through each book, trying to find out what is going on. And I don't know if we will come up with 3 documents or just 1 document. That the first part of the document is the list of the books and dissertation. And after finishing that, so now it's like a comment on each book, what is going on related to the topic.
Okay, so the first thing that you're going to have is a Word document. That's a bibliography. We call it the research bibliography.
Yes.
So that's one document. And as you find other sources, the rest of this course, you will continue to add to that research bibliography. So it sort of grows each week. And you will, this week it's dissertations and books. So if you don't know how to put a dissertation in bibliography format from Turabian, you have to learn how to do that. Say for a book, maybe the book is has an editor. You have to learn how to do that. You have to learn if a book has multiple authors. You may need to do that as well. But yeah, so you need to find this week. The goal is 30 books and dissertations total. So when I look at that document, it should be 30 books and dissertations on your topic. Okay. I'm not saying you have to read all those. I'm just saying you have to have a Word document with them, last name of author listed first. Okay. That's one document. The second document, the second thing you have to do is read a minimum of 300 pages. Okay. Now, what you can do is just copy and paste that onto a second Word document. And my suggestion was to turn it into an annotated bibliography, chronological bibliography. So as you look at that, there's 30 sources, put them in chronological order of date of writing.
Okay.
Okay, so it's the same sources, but now in a second document, it's in chronological order of writing. And the reason I'm saying that, when it comes time to read them, start reading them in chronological order. Then you begin to understand how a topic is being developed over time. Does that make sense?
Yes, but we have in the Calvary the ProQuest.
Yes.
We have just the abstract of the
No,
dissertation.
If you go, let me show you here. I'm going to bring this down. See if I can share this here. Okay, can you see my canvas now?
Yes.
Okay, so if you go to Calvary University Library Resources, okay? If you click on this, it talks about, here's the library. Let's check this out, physical materials here. And that's the link to the Hilder Croker library. And it tells you library hours and online catalog. So let's click on that. So let's do a keyword. What would you like for your keyword? You can do title, author, subject. What would be?
Okay.
Let's go with you have a title or you have a keyword. Let's go with keyword. What keyword would it be for your dissertation? You're going to search.
Peace.
Okay. So you got book, journal. Let's start there. And let's see what comes up. Hit submit. Okay, so here's a book by Michael Yosef, Jesus, Jihad, and Peace, What Bible Prophecy Says About World Events Today, published in 2015. Okay. Peace Child. You know the story of Peace Child?
Okay.
Don Richardson. You know the story of Don Richardson, Peace Child?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Don was a missionary in Indonesia. Two warring tribes who were killing each other. And so he was having a ministry to both these tribes. And he got them to come together in a peace ceremony. And the chief of the one tribe had a son who went to the chief of the other tribe, and the agreement was made that the chief of the other tribe would raise that other chief's son. And so he became the peace child. And everyone came and put their hands on the peace child. And there was reconciliation between these two warring tribes because of the peace child. So Don Richardson used peace child as his illustration for the gospel. That he explained how Jesus is our peace. Ephesians chapter 2 actually uses it. I've actually used this illustration when I've taught Ephesians. And Jesus is our peace child. We have, by faith, we have to put our hands on Jesus, believe that he died on the cross for our sins, and he brings about peace between a holy God and sinful man, and also between Gentiles and Jews. The cross unites saved Jews and saved Gentiles into one church. So if you've never read Peace Child, it's a wonderful story. This is the updated reference to 2014. So yeah, well, here you got a cult, Moon, Sun Myung Moon, peace-loving global citizen. So talk about reading a source that is opposed to our doctrinal view. You've heard of the Moonies, right? That's where it comes from. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you see, oh, that sounds interesting, peace-loving global citizen, but it's actually written by a cult leader. So yeah, again, understanding who that author is important, right? Where they're coming from theologically. But there's a whole list of sources here. Actually, 48 books in Calvary's library that relate to peace. Okay, so that shows you how to use the library, and you can get some of these books. I don't know what, because are you in the States or are you in Africa now?
I am in Africa.
Okay, so I don't know what the policy is with Calvary and international students in terms of the library, but you'd have to check with the librarian on that. Especially tell them you're in the PhD program. So I'm not sure how that works.
Are these e-books or just hard copy books?
Some reference some say they're ebooks, and
Okay.
others say, yeah. And that's where, again, when we get into Logos and Accordance, we talk about electronic Bible study software. That's where the ebooks can be very, very helpful, especially with Logos. At a fraction of the cost, you can get an ebook, commentaries and things like that, which I highly recommend, especially for international students. If you're having problems getting hard copy books from the States. So my recommendation would be to find out about what sources you need, but see if you can find them in electronic format. And again, the advantage, which I'll talk about later, of ebooks are searchable by text and topic. And that, again, and if you have that in your Logos or Accordance, and you search for peace, then all those books in your database or journal articles that relate to that topic will come up on your screen, and you just have to click through. You wouldn't have to read those books. You just have to click, and you would find out where, what sources they're found, what quotes, where the word peace is found. So it's really pretty nice. Going back to the dissertations, because John was asking about this when everybody came on today. At the very bottom, you have Galaxy Theological Journal. You also have ProQuest. This is the key database for finding dissertations. So it tells you how to do it. And John wasn't aware, but there's apparently a barcode found on your Calvary photo ID. So if you don't have a Calvary photo ID, you'll have to talk to the librarian, okay? Because the librarian may be able to help you with that. But let me just show you. This is ProQuest here. Oh, did it come up? No. Let's see. You have to go into populate. Now I have to remember my username and password. Let's let me go back to, because I think I have it on here.
You have it on first week, week one.
Yeah, I'm just clicking here.
Yeah.
So there it is. So here it is. You talk about finding dissertations. Okay, let's click on that. And give me a topic for one of you guys. We already did John here. Let's try something. How about Karis? You have a topic for me? For your dissertation?
Yes. I guess creation or creation accounts, something like that.
Okay, let's try creation. $30,000 results. Wow, that's a lot. We're gonna have to narrow it down. How about creation in Genesis 1? Okay, let's try that. Still 4,000 results. So here, the genesis of Jewish history. You got creation covenant. Here has abstract, preview, full text. If I click on full text, that's a 442-page dissertation. The genesis of Jewish history, creation covenant, historical consciousness, and the wisdom of Ben Sira, and the book of Jubilees. That's a 442-page dissertation there. Okay, so you can see how they did that. So you'll have access to this if you let's try allusions to Genesis 11 in the book of Daniel, exegetical intertextual study. All it has here is abstract, so it doesn't have all this. But let's see what the abstract is. All right, so it gives you a summary of what that is found. Here's the identifiers, the key words, title, author. 387 pages, was done in 2013. So place of publication, Ann Arbor, sounds like University of Michigan there. Let's see. The C in the Hebrew Bible, again, abstract, no dissertation there. Well, some of these don't relate, like creation in for-profit social enterprises. So you have to be careful as you're going through here. Church planting. It even searched the word in. See that? Because I had creation in Genesis 1. So like there, it actually searched the word in. It does mention creation, but small business owner in his creation of whatever. So yeah, again, you have let's see, sorted by. You can sort by oldest first, which relates to your chronological sources there. Let's see what happens there. How about limit to full text? We could say last 12 months, last year. We're down to 4 results. Okay. That doesn't relate. That doesn't relate. None of those relate. Let's go to last 5 years. I get 974 results. That's a lot. I'm going to take out the word in. see what we got. I don't know. A little bit of a mixed bag here. So you get the idea of trying to find something. You have to find what are your search words here. Everybody see that? What I did for the search?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alrighty. Sorry it wasn't a little helpful for you there. But at least I show you the source. ProQuest is for dissertations. Open access theses and dissertations is another one here. Okay, let's try creation here. Yeah, that's a lot. Let's try advanced search options. Well, let's put that works. Please slow down, our server's overwhelmed at the moment. That's funny. I'm not a bot, I'm not a crawler, and I'm not an indexer. Please take a break and come back later. That sounds like a good plan for us. We'll take a break and come back later. Okay, so it's 7:10. I'll see you at 7:15.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, everybody want to come back? Everybody see the PowerPoint okay? Cannot, okay. How about now? All righty. All right, step 3 was focusing on reading the sources, and as I said, you don't have time to read all the sources that you find. The goal is to basically start the process that you're going to be working on for a number of weeks and years here, so don't get anxious about reading all your sources. So you're starting your research bibliography, and we're going to talk about the literature review for your dissertation proposal. And I mentioned this illustration by Kibb from topic to thesis. He says, theological research is a multi-tiered process. In many cases, for example, your theological research will involve reading the Bible. We talked about the Bible as a primary source. But to read the Bible is to be dependent on a community of others who've done a great deal of work to make this reading possible. Archaeologists who've discovered manuscripts, copies of one biblical text or another. Papyrologists analyzing and typesetting the manuscripts. Textual critics examining variant readings in those manuscripts, rendering judgment on which option is the best one. Translators taking the resulting Greek or Hebrew or Aramaic text and putting it into English or another language that's appropriate for the kind of Bible they're trying to produce, the one that you plan to use in your theological research. So working on the research bibliography, what is that? Well, this is a list of sources that you compile at the beginning of your research. And these are the sources that you plan to read. You're going to read, research, and write your dissertation using these sources. Now, the actual bibliography, at the very end of the dissertation research and writing process, if you go through your research bibliography and you find sources that you did not read or use, you want to X those out. Right? So what happens is that your research bibliography becomes your actual bibliography then for your dissertation. But that happens at the very end of the dissertation research and writing process. So the actual bibliography then is the list of sources you actually read and used in the writing of your dissertation. And after writing the dissertation, you just delete the sources in your research bibliography you did not read and use to get to your actual bibliography. Now, we talked about another type, and that's an annotated chronological bibliography, right? Where you put your sources in the order, chronological order of writing. So journal articles in assignment 3, you're going to be searching for journal articles and electronic resources on the internet. So again, I've given you some. BibSac is the Bibliotheca Sacra is the Journal of Dallas Theological Seminary. IJOBA is the one of Calvary University, Interdisciplinary Journal of Biblical Authority. Journal of Dispensational Theology, Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, JETS, ETS, Master Seminary Journal, MSJ, Southern Baptist Journal of Theology, and the journal that I edited for 19 years, the Journal of Ministry and Theology. That's the Journal of Baptist Bible Seminary. So I'm going to put this down again and Go back to modules. Everybody see my canvas now? Okay, so showing you some different things here. ProQuest and Open Access, these are for dissertations. Theological ebooks, Atla, Index Theologicus. Well, let's go down to the Journal of the Evangelical Theological Society, JETS. Right, so I clicked on that, and so notice it started volume 1 back in 1958. That was when I was born. And let's just go to, let's see, 2018, I guess, is the last one they posted. Let's go there. So you've got for 2018, JETS 61. It comes out 4 times a year. You can become a ETS member with a master's degree, and you can attend the ETS national and regional conferences, and you pay a fee and you can get the hard copy of this. So here's JETS, and here, Evangelical Search for Chronological Gaps in Genesis 5 and 11, Jeremy Sexton here. And then you've got a response, a reply to Jeremy Sexton regarding the genealogies in Genesis by Andrew Steinman. And then Jeremy responding, Andrew Steinman's Search for Chronological Gaps. So since I teach Genesis, I'm very interested in that. So I just click on that. And there it is. And what I'll do is I'll probably put this in my folder for Biblical Young Earth Creation, because I put journal articles that I can find. Notice it has the search words, keywords there for searching. It has the abstract, tells something about the author, and then, as you can find your sources there for Genesis 5 and 11. So see, it's got the Hebrew in there. It's dealing with the Hebrew text. Attempts to disrupt the chronology. Right, so that's a nice article there if you were studying that. And if you want to see something of a debate here, apparently, reply to Jeremy Sexton regarding the genealogies in Genesis. There's the abstract again, keywords for searching. Right, so that's an 11-page response. So that's sort of nice what JETS did there. And it's a good example to you of how reading a theological journal, here, this is from 2018, very, very helpful. Give you a lot of ideas, the sources that they used in that. Let's go back to Galaxy. Have you heard of Galaxy Theological Journals? Okay, so click on that. Look at all the different journals here. You got BibStack, Schaeffer Theological Seminary Journal, Christian Apologetics Journal, Detroit Baptist Seminary Journal, Grace Theological Journal. Let's just click on Grace. And notice that it was only for about 11 years, 80 to 91. Let's go back to the beginning. Homer Kent, Time to Teach, Test of Abraham, John Lawler. John Lawler taught Greek at Cedarville for many years with my dad. And my dad got his Ph.D. from Grace, and this was the journal. Project Graham Cord, that was early database type of study prior to Logos and Accordance, Graham Cord. So go all the way back to 1980, and they're, you know, thinking forward thinking there. James Greer was my philosophy teacher at Cedarville. Some of you think Karis is the only one. Took my class on biblical philosophy and worldview, and I reference Dr. Greer in that course. So I remember him teaching this in his class, but this is I actually got the hard copy paper when he wrote it, and then he submitted it and was published in their first journal. So if you're looking for an article dealing with apologetics or the Bible, bibliology, this would be a great article to read. Okay, so again, going back, you see BibStack, the oldest theological journal in America. Yes, go ahead.
Is it possible to search by topic?
Can those be searched by topic?
Or else do we have to check each and every journal?
Good question. You have to ask the librarian on that one.
Okay.
In fact, I was going to mention to you, Tiffany Smith is our librarian.
Yeah.
So if you've not worked with Tiffany, she will be glad to help you with any searches. So if I didn't help you tonight, check with Tiffany Smith if you need help with searching for something electronically in the Calvary University library. And I'm sure she could help you with ProQuest or open access theses and dissertations. Karis, go ahead.
I actually have used this quite a bit. So if you go to the right-hand side underneath journal menu, and it says
go back out.
Oh no, where you are right now on the right-hand side, as we're looking at it, it might be your left. Underneath journal menu, if you just go up, yeah, and then there's a link saying search journals. If you click on that, and then you can put in your keywords there.
So you can sort by year. Okay, so put a keyword here. Let's try
perseverance.
Perseverance. Okay. Yeah, I know the spelling. Let's see.
Oh, okay.
See all those different articles. So that'll help you with week 3.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it tells you 2019, the 5th heading, The Perseverance of the Saints by Barry York. Let's see if it has a full text. I believe you can click on this where it says this thing here, and it'll actually be a PDF. Yeah, it comes up down there. So you could save it to your, that to your electronic file.
Oh,
so
okay.
This download up here where it says download, and you could put it right into your file like that. Or if you wanted to print out a hard copy, you could do that. Let's go back and see. These are searching all the different ones here. They have different names of different people. How about this? A History of the Doctrine, John Jefferson Davis, Jets article. There it is. So that was done in 1991, Jets. So again, if you click on that, you get a PDF down here. And that is a 9-page article. I think it's the whole text. Let's see. It looks like it is. And so like you would find Perseverance, Arminius, Anglican creeds, Council of Trent, Calvin. So always great to start with the history of a doctrine and debate. You're going to find out, you know, where it's found here, Summa Theologica. And I think they have endnotes here. Yes, they do. So the endnote, any reference in these electronic ones, you have endnotes, but it tells you where to find it in what was that, Aquinas? Thomas Aquinas and Summa Theologica. So it actually tells you the primary source for you there. So you could actually go and find that primary source. The electronic source, Logos and Accord, is going to have all those primary sources for you, brother. You're going to find it really nice to be able to search by text and topic with those. So let's go back and see if we didn't help Karis last time. And she was helping us here. Let's see if I can find something for her here on creation. Let's see if creation in Genesis 1, if that helps. Okay. Well, here's Genesis, ancient Near Eastern stories. This is more like it. David Sumura, Bible and Spade. Yeah, that would be fantastic. I've read some of his work, very, very good. You definitely want to read David Sumura on Genesis here. Here you go. You got a 5-page article, Genesis and Ancient Near Eastern Stories of Creation and the Flood. Definitely want to include that. You got Genesis 1. He mentions Enuma Elish there. Atrahasis for sure. Yeah. So this is reprinted by permission from a book printed by Eisenbronze.
I missed where you converted it to a PDF. What did you do?
You up here where it says download. Let's go back here. I'll show you.
Okay.
So when it comes to this,
oh,
if you want the PDF, click on that, the little thing, and down here at the bottom of my screen, it's a PDF, and then I click on that, and then it comes up on my screen as a PDF. And then you can either print it or download it.
Yeah.
And best to download them, then you can just you can use them then, in your electronic files.
Yeah.
And I typically do that. You'll see going back to how I do that for modules. That's, you see some of my articles from the past and things like that. My journal articles are in academia, which is also searchable. You got digital theological library, Bible.org, academia. You're going to have, thousands of articles in academia. And so, for instance, here's one on theological prolegomena. Dr. Stallard's teaching that right now, and it actually says download it. You can translate it if you just wanted to read it there on theological prolegomena.
Okay.
If you click on, I think, my link here, you can go to my website, my profile here, and here's my website, which I've linked to academia. And I've got my CV there, my articles, and my website just has the same stuff, but it has a cool background. You can create your own if you want to become part of academia. So that has the little books there, a little biography there, my research interests. Like if you want to contact me, that's, you pay for that. But I decided rather than try to have my own .com, which I tried that once. I like this better because I've got people all over the world reading my stuff now. See, I've got 57,000 views. I'm in the top 0.5%. I've got 1,438 followers because they find me through searching in academia, and then you can click on analytics, which is pretty cool. And you can see, like, there's a postdoctoral student in Brazil who read Doctrines of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Someone from Las Osas, California, The Historicity of the Resurrection. Somebody from the Netherlands read that as well. So you can see what papers they're reading, where they're from. It tells you what time they. So I'd much rather have that. I'd much rather have than people, trying to find my name. I'd rather put my work out there and then let them search by text and topic. And so that's why I have my website with academia. Okay. So you can all start that yourself. Start putting your own research out there, and it's pretty exciting to see people from all over the world reading your your research. So yeah, very exciting. Yeah, I'll put that down. And let's go to stop that. And we're back. You see the PowerPoint again, right? Okay, good. We're talking about searches, and that's what you're going to be doing in the next week as you begin looking for journal articles, electronic resources that relate to your topic. And I've just gave you some ideas there. All right, so here's a goal to not only to find sources, but find newer sources. You probably thought find older sources. Well, older sources are great, but newer sources are great because they probably read the older sources. If it's a comprehensive newer source, they're going to have read sources, maybe sift through sources, and that's nice, right? Because they've read and sifted through some sources, and they've sort of thrown out, well, that's not very good. So if you find an author or a researcher that you like, writer, who is a scholar, you want to look and see what they've said. So like academia, you might have your list of scholars. For instance, you might want to search for Clinton Arnold. I don't know if he's on academia or not, but I'm just saying, find your list of scholars and see if you can find their either their website and or their research electronic. Now, this is true for Logos and Accordance. You can search by author, text, or topic. So news sources, if you can, books and journal articles published in the last 10 years, because again, we're living in the 21st century, right? So unless you're doing something dealing with church history, newer articles, which you want to look at the latest research. Again, limiting your search to sources that deal with your topic. And make sure you can answer this question. Okay, so what is the question? Why did I include this source in my research bibliography? You can't answer that question, then you need to throw it away. Get it out of your research bibliography. You don't want to spend some time reading it. Okay, so you should be able to answer that question for any source that if I looked at your research bibliography and say, why did you include that source? You should tell me the reason why. Okay. Well, searching databases, we've been talking about that, and I try to find as many databases that will be helpful to you. If you come across a database that's not included in my Canvas, please let me know. I'll add it to the list. You find something that you like to use in your own research, let me know. But I tried to add to this. This is I think you're the third group that I've taught in this course. And so I try to find some of the better resources for you. So I mentioned academia. How about Dr. House, the Visual Study Bible? Did he show you that? His Visual Study Bible? That's pretty cool work that he's doing there. Hopefully he's going to get paid for that the way he should. Society of Biblical Literature, a little more liberal than JETS. Where do I record my sources? Well, anybody using Zotero, which is pushed by Kib in his book? Anybody use it?
Yeah,
Karis and John use it. So I've not used it, but I read it in Kib that he says it's a great way to organize your bibliography. Explain. Karis, we'll go with you first. Explain why this is a good resource to use.
I'm quite new to using it, but I like the way that you can, so you can often put in the the number of the article, and it will put all the information in for you. So then you just need to go back and check to make sure it transferred it correctly. But you can also make like folders. So I've got one for my accounts of creation, and then I've got one for like new creation, one for creation and evolution, and so I can like organize my sources in the different folders, which I find really helpful.
Thank you for sharing that. How about you, John?
Yeah, the input technology is really good. You just put in the ISBN number and it'll automatically put all the information there. And when you cite the source, all you have to do is click Zotero, add, edit, and then you click on the source that you want, and it'll automatically put it in the Turabian or Chicago style for you automatically. And so it's really convenient. I use it to cite sources when I write my sermon notes, Bible study notes, stuff.
Now, does it only do the bibliography? What about footnotes?
Oh yeah, that's what I meant was footnotes. It does bibliography and footnotes. It does footnotes really well.
So if you reference a footnote, you don't have to type out the whole source. You just have to know the ISBN number, and it'll put it in the correct Turabian style footnote. Is that correct?
That's correct. So you, like Carrie said, you put the ISBN number and you organize that by basically the topic and the files that you want. For example, I'm right now teaching through the Gospel of John. So all I have to do, first of all, is get my 20 commentaries on John and just type in the ISBN number. It'll automatically put it in there. And then I say, okay, well, I want to quote D.A. Carson on this one. So I click on D.A. Carson and it automatically interfaces with the Word document. So there's a function, there's an interface in Word. So all you have to do is click that button and automatically put it in there. And
so how much time do you think it saves you in writing a paper to have that source?
Immensely, because it automatically orders it too. So if you go, oh, well, this is footnote number 2, but I want to put a footnote before then. And if I do that, it automatically does it for you. Yeah, spacing, order, everything.
Fantastic.
And then, yeah, at the end,
and that's the reason why Kib is sold on it.
That's right.
I'm
going to need to learn how to use it. So I'm thankful that my students are using it. And
I forgot to mention it. There's also a tab that you can add notes. So you can look at your bibliography and then you could add notes that are linked to that one. So when you click on it, you can see everything you've written on about it, which is quite good too.
That's very, very nice. It's almost like that annotated idea. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just put the same question about what you asked, and courtesy of John and Karis, I just downloaded it today, so I'm going to start using it. So I just wanted to say thank you.
And is it a cost or is it free?
No, it's free.
It's free.
It's free. Wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
You go to Zotero.org. Don't go to .com, just .org, and then you'll find it.
Yep.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, for the dissertation and the proposal, you're going to either one or both the literature review. And so the literature review relates to tracing a topic, whether you're going to do it chronologically or by different subtopics. We'll explain that here in a minute. It's going to be part of your dissertation proposal, which is the end goal of this course. So as you do all these assignments, when it comes time to write the dissertation proposal, if you've done some reading and you've done the annotated chronological bibliography, it's just a matter of taking that information and putting it into paragraphs and summarizing what you've read. So I've given you a copy of my chapter 1 in my own dissertation, and so you'll see a little bit of my literature review there, talking about biblical theology and then theologies of Paul. And what I'm trying to do is show the gap in the literature, that we have biblical theologies, we have theologies of Paul, Pauline theology, but no specific biblical theology of Ephesians. That was what I was trying to show, the gap in the literature there. So we've used this illustration over and over again, but maybe you'll get tired of it, but it's like entering a theological conversation. You take your seat at the table, you listen to the scholars, you discuss the various topics and issues, and the goal of the literature review is to learn what has been written on your topic, so you can participate in the conversation. To learn what questions are essential, what needs to be researched. So that's the reason why you're reading. It's not only to find out, who are the scholars, what are they talking about, what do we know for certain, what areas are being debated, and what areas still need to be researched. Those are really the key questions as you look at your books and journal articles. What do we know for certain? What are the facts? What areas are being debated? What's the debate? What area still needs to be researched? All right, so I posted in Canvas, this is a hard copy printed. It's called the FAST Dissertation. So some of these ideas taken from this. In fact, I'll tell you that chapter 1 is what is expected of you. Chapter 2 is called topic selection, which was the theme of last week. Topic selection as chapter 2 in the FAST dissertation. Chapter 3 is literature review, which is sort of the goal of this week, to talk about your research bibliography and your literature review. Right, so some of these ideas I'm taking from this. Chapter 4 is called research collection and methodology. So this is not a long paper. I'm not saying you have to read it, but what you're going to hear me say, I'm telling you up front, my ideas are taken from this. So some tips from the FAST dissertation, stating your view on the topic. You have a topic, and then you write your view on the topic. So what is your view on this particular topic? And that might be a half page or so of paper. As you find these dissertations, what will really be helpful if you can find the abstract, which is a summary of the dissertation. So rather than having to read a 300-page dissertation, the abstract will sort of boil down the dissertation to hopefully the thesis and the argument, so that you could actually take those abstracts. They would be like summaries for your dissertation part. Just keep that in mind. And there's abstracts often for journal articles. Not every journal article has an abstract, but whenever you find one, again, what are you looking for? The thesis and the argument. We talked about looking for and reading the best sources on your topic, taking notes on your reading, using bibliographic software, which we talked about, Zotero, using the databases, using the keywords, right? So some of this, hopefully, from different sources, from KIB, from the FAST dissertation, from my lecture, hopefully you say, I've heard that before, okay, but that's good. It's like a little bit of reinforcement. We're on the same page. We're trying to do the same task. Mining bibliographies, tertiary sources, look for those because they contain books and journal articles on secondary sources, which are commenting on the primary sources. Also, why write a literature review? Now, some dissertations have a whole chapter with a literature review. And again, if you do a annotated chronological bibliography and have that as part of your dissertation, that's viewed. If in the academia, if they see a chapter with a literature review, you know, a lot of people want to read that chapter. Why do you think that's so?
I think it tells if we have used proper and good sources, because we put there the summary. So it tells the reader if we have used, you know, related good sound materials.
Yep. It helps you see that you are now a scholar who can enter into the conversation, going back to the illustration again, because you've read the main scholars on this topic and you know what they've said on it. And the advantage of the annotated chronological bibliography in a literature review is it sort of tells a story about that topic and the debates that are found there. So why write this? Well, you determine what scholars have written on your topic. You evaluate the current state of research. Where are we at in 2023? To learn the debates, what debates are key in this topic. To discover some possible areas to research for your dissertation to contribute to a gap of knowledge. So maybe you want to contribute and answer the debate. There might be a side of the debate that you want to take, that you want to argue for. Well, how do I write it? Well, 3 different possibilities. I've suggested the chronological approach, but that's not the only approach. Right? So the chronological, organized literature review by reviewing books, journal articles in order of date of writing. Okay. So I said this is just one way. Here's another way, thematic. So you organize the literature review into sections addressing different subtopics of the topic. So for instance, theology proper is your topic. Your subtopics, God as creator, God as redeemer, and God as judge. So God as creator, then you would have a list of books that deal with God as creator. On that topic, you would have books on God as redeemer. And maybe you don't want to do it in chronological order. Maybe you want to do it on best book first. So the idea is if you're going to read on this topic, here's the best book that I've found on this topic. You want to read this first. Here's the second book. Here's the third. If you teach as a professor in a school, you want to find the best books at the right academic level for your students. In 2022, myself and some other Bible professors here at Calvary, we went through all the syllabi and all the textbooks in all of our courses, in all of our programs in Bible and theology for this one purpose, to make sure we have a sequence and a scaffolding that undergrad are reading the proper level textbooks, then master's level, and then PhD. And we wanted to eliminate as much as possible any overlap so that master's level is not reading the same book as undergrad, but they're reading a different book on the topic. So those were 2 things. One was, is it at the right academic level? And second, there had to be a sequence, because we have undergrad systematic theology 1, 2, and 3. We have graduate master's level systematic theology 1, 2, and 3. And then we have PhD systematic theology 1, 2, and 3. Right. So we've got to make sure, since we have similarity in courses, that we don't have the same textbooks and we also have to do the courses in a different way, which we've tried to do that as well. So chronological is one approach, thematic is another approach, or theoretical, relating to various theories and views. I mentioned like interpretations of Hebrews 6. So I quoted that book. And so maybe you have the Arminian views on Hebrews 6, and you have a list of books that define that view. And then the Calvinistic one. So you have a list of books and articles that relate. So it's not by chronology, not so much a theme or subtopic, but the different interpretations of the topic. Questions on that before we move into? Yes, go ahead, Karis.
If you're doing quite a like well written on topic like Genesis 1, how much do you include in your in the review? Do you have to do like most of the books, or do you just pick out kind of the top few? How would you approach that?
Because when you have a topic like Genesis 1, where you have so many people who have written on that, yeah, you're going to have to be selective. There is room to interact and critique a particular individual or whatever. So when I teach biblical young earth creation, I talk about different views on Genesis 1, like the gap theory, right? Progressive creation, young earth creation, old earth creation, different views on Genesis 1. So that would relate to either thematic or theoretical there, or topical, if you want to say it that way, chronological or topical. So then you're looking for some of the one book or journal article that best represents a view. Okay, so you're not going to have, you won't be able to cover every book, but the idea is to find the ones that relate specifically to what you're trying to accomplish.
So if I was looking at the connection between the first creation and the second creation, should I be looking mainly for books that focus on both creations, or should I be looking at the general debate to prove that not that much has been written about the two creations together?
Well, you're probably going to need to look at commentaries too, like Genesis and Revelation. All right, so you're looking at Genesis 1, you're looking at what, Revelation 21 and 22. Okay. So you look at some commentaries and see on that. And I have a book, was thinking about your topic. Oh, Alan Ross. Is this Ross? No, this is Alan Ross has one that you would want to read. Now, this is not going to be from our theological viewpoint, but it's called From Creation to New Creation, Biblical Theology and Exegesis. Essays in honor of G.K. Beale. And it's published by Hendrickson, Gertner, Gurtner, and Glad are the editors, Gladd. So, for instance, I have to tell Ian, because he's writing on the temple. Chapter 1 is Eden, a temple, reassessment of the biblical evidence. So that's chapter 1. See if there's anything with Revelation. That would be interesting. Christopher Beetham, chapter 13, From Creation and New Creation, the biblical epic of king, human vice regency, and kingdom. That would be interesting. Again, I don't think they come from our theological view. Ross's book, I have it at home. I put it over here. It deals with biblical theology of worship. I'll have to look it up, see if I can find it for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, let's take a 5-minute break. We come back. We want to talk about defining your thesis and argument. And getting there will be more toward the end of this course, just to let you know. It's not going to be at the beginning, but toward the end, as you have done some initial reading on your topic, once you start reading this week, hopefully you're going to begin to narrow your topic and then eventually come to what is your thesis that you're trying to argue for in your dissertation. And then once you have that thesis, then you begin to think about how you're going to explain and defend it. That is your argument. Okay, so I'll see you in 5 minutes. Well, welcome back. We're talking about this whole process of research bibliography and how that relates to your literature review. And whether you're going to have a chapter in your dissertation that's a literature review, you'll have to ask yourself that. As you look at my dissertation, you'll see I included it in chapter 1, so I didn't have it as a separate chapter. So you'll see how I did it. And I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, but I'm just saying that it is one way. So now we're going to move to talk about your thesis and your argument. So notice that the name of this book that you read, From Topic to Thesis. So your topic is not the same as a thesis. That's important to know. That's why it says from topic to thesis. So, and this is really, what can I say, the result of your reading and research. Going through the process will take you from topic to thesis. So I don't expect you to have a thesis for next week or even the week after. But I hope by the end of these 8 weeks that you have maybe have some maybe I should call it a preliminary thesis. In science, we used to call it hypothesis, right? You had a hypothesis and then you had to test the hypothesis, if you remember from your science classes. And so that's really what I'm talking about here. As a result of your reading and research, you come up with a possible thesis. It would need to be examined in detail to determine whether you want to make that the heart of your dissertation or not.
May I ask which part of chapter 1 reflects your literature review in your chapter 1 dissertation? The one you gave
well,
us?
you'll see some comments that I make about biblical theology as well as Pauline theology.
Okay.
Different books that I read or looked at.
Okay, thank you.
So what is the thesis? It's a specific claim that you make about some information which you research. All right, so you have information that comes from your reading. So you're claiming, or you're asserting an assertion about the information. The argument is going to support your thesis. Okay, so the thesis comes from the topic. It's something that you're claiming about the topic, and then it's supported by the argument, which is reflected in the main points, the structure, the outline of your dissertation. So for my dissertation, which was a biblical theology of Ephesians, if you looked at my table of contents, I talked in the chapter 1 about what is biblical theology and how historical context is important in biblical theology. And so I actually had a whole chapter dealing with the church in Ephesus, the historical context for Ephesians, the church that was started by Paul. And so I dealt with that. I looked at the historical context, and then I had an introduction to the book. We're arguing for Paul and the purpose of the book, but in that sort of a background information. But looking at the chapters themselves, I have a chapter that relates to the Trinity and salvation, which reflecting Ephesians 1 and 2. A chapter on the ecclesiology of Ephesians, really sort of the heart of my thesis. Chapter dealing with different ways of walking, of living that relates to the key word peripateo, walk. So I talk about that in chapter 1, you know, how the key terms, key theology comes from the terminology used by the author. So Kibb says the research process, the movement that you make from identifying the set of information, that's your topic, to making an argument about that set of information, which is your thesis. From the FAST dissertation, a topic is not the same as a thesis. A thesis is much more specific. So you're going to revise this thesis as you go along through the research process. You think of it sort of like a hypothesis, right? You need a preliminary thesis to direct your research. Otherwise, you won't know what research material to include or exclude. Okay, so for those of you who've had homiletics, expository preaching, and I taught it for 19 years at BBS, your thesis is like your big idea, your main proposition of your sermon, and that's your I used to say that's the target that you're shooting the arrow toward. The arrow is the sermon itself. And so what illustration, what explanation of the text, what illustration, what application has to all be related to that big idea. If it's not, then your sermon does not have unity. All right, it's more like buckshot than a single arrow. Okay, so the thesis, if you can put it in one sentence, it should be stated that way, and someone should be able to reasonably argue yes or no to your thesis. That is, they agree with it or disagree with it. So in a sense that you are taking a side or a viewpoint on your topic. Another source is to check out Scribner. Scribner on thesis statement says a thesis statement sums up the main points of your paper. It's like the big idea of a sermon. I added that. A thesis statement is just 1 or 2 sentences long, usually appears at the introduction to the dissertation. And here's another thing to think about. It can be thought of as the answer to your research question. If you have one main research question and the answer to that could be the thesis statement. So later on in the process, you're going to come up with 20 research questions for your topic. Okay, so you can begin thinking about that, write those down, start writing them down as you read and think about what are some things that you need to research on your topic. So again, I think this is from Kibb. If you write your dissertation before you have a thesis, you may have to rewrite your dissertation. Why is that? Because it's not going to fit together. It's going to be like pieces of the puzzle that you try to fit together, but they just don't fit. And chapter 4 of your dissertation just hangs out there, and it's like, well, why did you put that there? And you won't be able to defend it because it doesn't fit. It's a piece of the puzzle that doesn't fit, and because it doesn't fit, it shouldn't be there. So you want your dissertation to fit together, and the different chapters, you want them to fit together. Your thesis should make a unique contribution to the theological conversation. That's your goal. I want people, when they read my dissertation, if they've read it, to say, oh, that's interesting. I've never thought of doing biblical theology on a book before, and specifically looking at vocabulary and argumentation of the author and how that all relates to theology. So it's really, truly exegetical theology. That's what I try to show. Well, see, as a result of this process if you can write out your thesis and argument in a paragraph. That's the key. If you can do it in a paragraph, that's like writing your abstract, right? What are you trying to prove? And what do you have to contribute to the theological conversation? Okay, so some questions to ask yourself. And so the thesis is the big idea of your dissertation. So what's the big idea? And then the argument, how will you prove your thesis? How will you prove your thesis? That's the argument. What points can you make to prove it? And that can be reflected in the chapters of your dissertation. Now, talking about outline, which again reflects the argument. So I talk a lot about this in preaching. You have main points and subpoints. And we'll talk more about this when we get into logic, that your subpoints explain your main points. But the main points are like your chapters in your dissertation. Everything sort of hangs on those main points. Your subpoints are explaining your argument, explanation, illustration, application. We talk about that in preaching. Or argumentation, the reason. We talk about argumentation, the reason for your main points. So after you've come up with your argument, or your outline of your dissertation, you want to put it that way, you can go back and edit and change the titles of your chapters. But your titles of your chapters should relate to the main points of the argument of your thesis, what you're trying to prove. So if I asked you, well, why is chapter 4 here and not in chapter 2, you'd be able to explain that. It sort of tells a story. And we talked about this in not only in preaching courses, but when you look at narrative, you have an introduction, you have the setting, you have the scene, you have the characters, you have the plot. Plots are made up of scenes. And change of scene, there might be 3 or 4 scenes in a plot. You often have conflict and conflict resolution in plots, in narrative. And so you look for that. And then you have the not only the resolution of the conflict, but the conclusion, which sometimes in narrative, you'll find the point of the story. And in Old Testament narratives, you'll find maybe the name of God that's revealed, like Jehovah Jireh at the end of the narrative about Abraham and Isaac on Mount Moriah. So if your dissertation can tell a story, that's another interesting way to look at it that way. It sort of fits together in that way. All right, any questions on that before we go to developing your research questions on the topic? Questions on thesis, argument, outline, chapters in your dissertation?
So do we need to have a page just to write our thesis, to explain with the title thesis, and then with a paragraph or 2 to explain that?
That will be in your final product, your dissertation proposal. You will have that. That will be there. Okay. You'll have that, your title, your thesis. You'll have your literature review. You'll have your outline reflected in your chapters. Your research questions will be part of the dissertation proposal, as well as your research bibliography.
So what is the difference between thesis and the thesis section and the abstract?
Well, there's similarities, which is sort of the abstract is sort of a summary of the whole thing. Okay. So it's sort of summary of what your dissertation is all about, which reflects thesis and argument. Yeah. Very similar.
Okay.
And in fact, if you look at you looked at some dissertations for assignment 1, was it easy to find the thesis? Not easy? Did the abstract help you at all?
Yes, it did. Yeah.
Mine didn't have an abstract. Maybe that's a modern thing. My dissertation was written in the 70s, and I guess that wasn't required back then.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So it wasn't really, it wasn't easy to find that thesis. But as I read through it, I kind of got a sense of it. Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about research questions on your topic and starting your research. So from topic to research problem, and remember what I said, that your thesis may be answering the research problem, or you have a research question. Your thesis may be the answer to one of your research questions. And so coming up with a good research question and or questions can help you as you begin to think about your topic. So what is research? It's expanding the knowledge on a particular topic. That's what you're doing. When you do research, you're expanding your knowledge on a particular topic. Now, I mentioned reading current literature. That's going to help you to understand your key issues. And if you find, we looked at that one on the perseverance, which gave like a history of it. That's interesting because you're going to find the history of the debate, the different people who debated the topic, and that would be a nice chapter in your dissertation where you could trace through church history a particular debate. And you might find a debate on a particular interpretation, like Hebrews 6, so I showed you that book. A book came out of that. So different theological views, different interpretations, which we just talked about there, can lead to a research problem or question. Of course, you're starting with the Bible, the primary source. And so what are the key scriptures that relate to your topic? So some of my guys in the PhD program in cohort 1, for instance, they, like Ian Bacon, is doing the temple. His topic is the temple in Ezekiel. But that topic, the temple in Ezekiel is a unique temple. I believe it's the millennial temple there. But he references the temple in Genesis 1. We saw an article tonight about that in Eden. He references, for instance, in the course on the Gospels, he talked about Jesus being in the temple, and John 2, the discussion about the temple of his body and tearing down the temple. So he did a exegetical paper on that text. And then in Revelation 21:22, there is no temple in the eternal state. So we talk about that. So you have a temple in the millennium, but no temple in the eternal state. Is there a main problem passage on your topic? And as you begin to think about, we'll transition into the remaining courses in your program. You might want to do an exegetical paper on a particular text that relates to your topic. So you think about, how is this topic developed in the Bible? If you can trace it from beginning to end, we call progressive revelation. So where is it first mentioned in the Bible? And where is it last mentioned? And just thinking about progressive revelation and tracing that topic through. And this is where there's a lot of room, for instance, for dissertations on the use of a particular Old Testament text in the New. When you think about, you have a Hebrew study on the Old Testament text. You've got a Greek text, and of course, the Old Testament text written in Hebrew, the New Testament text written in Greek. But then you put the Septuagint in there. We'll talk about the Septuagint as a source, an early translation of a Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, and then how the New Testament authors used the Septuagint. And so that gets into, actually I have a whole book on my shelf here. The where is it? It's a commentary. It's a commentary by Beale and Carson, commentary on the New Testament use of the Old Testament. We'll talk about that. But that's there's so much room for dissertations on various texts. Yeah, you got it there. A whole bunch of text in the Bible where you have the quoting from an Old Testament text. I actually did I don't know if I gave it to you in Canvas or not, but I did a paper that became a journal article for the Journal of Ministry and Theology on the use of Psalm 68 in Ephesians 4. The phrase who is he that ascended but the one who descended into the lower parts of the earth? And so I look at, that's probably one of the most difficult texts in Ephesians to interpret. And so I actually wrote a paper on that, the different views on that text. But there's so much more I could have said on that topic. So start with your primary source, the Bible. Start with progressive revelation. There's a lot of room here because from a dispensational viewpoint, there's room for this idea of progressive revelation, which is not really found in the covenant theology view because they're reading New Testament truth back into the Old. And so they're sort of ignoring progressive revelation for a theological hermeneutic, where their theology overrides the exegesis of the text, and that leads to allegorization of the text. And you talked about that with Dr. House. So again, dealing with the Bible and inductive method of Bible study, progressive revelation, survey, reading through the Bible to find the key texts on your topic and writing these down. And again, topical Bible can help you here, or if you did a word search in Logos or Accordance, that can help. Analysis, which involves the study of each of those biblical texts on your topic in their context. And so you start with survey, that's the big picture, and then analysis, sort of looking at each piece of the puzzle, translating the Hebrew Old Testament and the Greek New Testament text on the topic. We'll talk more about this, the structural markers, examining the critical commentaries, that's doing the analysis, and then the synthesis, where you write down the summaries of your exegetical studies. That's when you put the puzzle together. So survey, you see the big picture. Analysis, you look at the pieces, and then synthesis, you begin to put the pieces together. And that relates not only to your topic, but to your whole program, as I've tried to design it for you here at Calvary. Question on that before, let's just go back here. Question, how much time we got here? Okay, we're doing pretty good. We can finish this next week, so I'm not going to rush this. Question on that. We're talking about researching the primary source. We're talking about going from topic to research problem. And we start with the Bible here and tracing a topic through the Bible, progressive revelation. And then as you think about inductive Bible study, observation, interpretation, application, you think about survey, analysis, synthesis, getting the big picture of the topic in the Bible, and then analyzing each individual text in its context, which would involve looking at the Hebrew and the Greek, and then your synthesis where you're seeing how it all fits together. And this is where reading an encyclopedia or a Bible dictionary, they've done this well. Your encyclopedia and Bible dictionary entries on different topics. You look up a topic in a Bible encyclopedia or a dictionary. If it's well written, that's what they do. They've surveyed the topic, they've done the analysis, and then they do the synthesis, and they show how it all fits together. Questions or comments on that before I go on?
My question is about when this happened. So in the process, just when it will happen for us to do this exercise.
Well, where it's going to happen in terms of the
Yes.
program, in the second year, your first year of your program, you had advanced hermeneutics, theological method, right? So that was sort of laying a foundation. Your interpretation, how to interpret the Bible, LGH, literal, grammatical, historical interpretation. This course, laying foundation, how to do dissertation research, beginning the process. The next course is Hebrew exegesis. And then you have Greek exegesis. So once you've selected a particular topic, now what's the key text in the Hebrew Bible that deals with that topic? You want to do an exegetical paper in that course. When it comes to the Greek New Testament, is your topic, where is it found in the Greek New Testament? Let's do an exegetical paper on this particular text. So you're doing analysis on a particular text. You're getting into that Greek or the Hebrew and looking at that text in its context there. And the synthesis part is a result of taking all the courses and all your papers and sort of putting it all together.
Now, as my topic is in the New Testament.
Right.
So am I going to write something also on Old Testament related to my topic in the New Testament?
If you can find something. If you can find something that relates to your topic from the Old Testament, and you mentioned peace, right?
Yes.
Which
in
is
Romans.
how about the whole concept of shalom?
Yes.
So I would, if from Hebrew, I would want to do a study on shalom, and that's the greeting given by Jews, and shalom when they say hi, and shalom when they say goodbye. So it's their greeting. So, but what does it mean? What does shalom mean? That would be a word study, would make a good exegetical study for that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now we're going to talk about commentaries and theologies. Or did you have a question or comment? Somebody raising a hand there?
Yeah.
I thought I saw it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
How about for people like John who are writing their research paper on on a book like First Samuel,
Right.
there won't be any specific text, but they have to kind of broaden that idea of looking to the whole book, the writing to approach.
Yeah, the whole book study is the survey. The analysis would be the individual pericopes within First Samuel, and then synthesis is really reflected like an exegetical outline of First Samuel. When I was at Dallas, we had to learn to write sort of like arguments of the book. So I actually had to write like the argument of First and Second Samuel. So basically showing how the different sections of the book fit together to tell one story. So that's a helpful exercise. I've done that for all 66 books of the Bible. I have exegetical outlines for every book. Help me to think through how the Bible fits to each book of the Bible fits together.
Okay, thank you.
Now later on, assignment, trying to show you how each one of the assignments relates to the whole process tonight. Hopefully you're getting to see that. So assignment 4, you're going to start reading the book by Craig Evans, Ancient Text for New Testament Study. And you're going to get into the Old Testament sources. So Old Testament Apocrypha, Old Testament Pseudepigrapha, Dead Sea Scrolls, Targums, Rabbinic literature. Okay. Assignment 5, you get into the New Testament. You have Philo, Josephus, New Testament Apocrypha, Pseudepigrapha, early church fathers. Okay, so you're looking at context as well as various sources that comment on the primary source, which is the Bible, right? So secondary sources, especially as you get into assignment 6 is the research questions and the training videos for Logos and Accordance. So those two sort of go together. Assignment 7, biblical theology, systematic theology are secondary sources. Commentaries, secondary sources. So secondary sources are explaining primary sources. So in the case of the Bible, which is our primary source, lexicons are a secondary source in helping us define key words. Concordances, secondary source, where keywords are used in the Bible. So hopefully you'll learn how to use the electronic Bible study software and learn how to do a word study in Logos or Accordance. It's going to speed the process up for you. Theological dictionaries give in-depth word studies. Commentaries discover the different interpretation of key Bible texts on your topic. Examine the exegetical reasons given to justify various interpretations. We call that validation, a validation step in interpretation. It's important to surface possible interpretations. That's true for writing an exegetical paper. You always want to try to surface interpretations, explain them, give the arguments for each one of the views, critique those arguments using the knowledge and skills that you've learned, and then give your view, give your interpretation, and defend it. And you should be able to do that in an exegetical paper here at Calvary. That should be something that you should know how to do. So basically, you're interacting with a commentary and you're learning how to read a commentary critically. That's one of my goals in the PhD program, that you would be able to read exegetical commentaries critically. That means not every commentary is written from a dispensational premillennial perspective, but there are good commentaries out there that you need to be aware of and read and look at how they are interpreting the text, because they may not come from a have come from a dispensational school or perspective, but they may give you great comments on the Hebrew text or the Greek text, that you can glean that information from their commentaries. We talk about journal articles tonight, theses and dissertations. Going to be journals are going to give you the latest research, and theses and dissertations are going to give you the detailed research, because they're going to go 300 plus pages on your topic. But all of these are secondary sources to studying. So for instance, if you chose to study Josephus, I mean, you can't just study Josephus and say, I'm going to study all the writings of Josephus. It's impossible. I mean, thousands of dissertations been written on Josephus. You'd have to pick maybe one book and one section of one book, right? So dissertation involves going deep.
Is there a page limit, minimum and maximum? That was one of the questions I asked.
Well, yeah, for your dissertation, the standard that we've set here is 300 pages.
Okay.
Okay. So talk here in a minute. I don't know if I'll get there tonight or not, about the remaining classes in the PhD program. But you do have 4 dissertation research and writing classes, and you're going to be writing 75 pages every 8 weeks, which turns out to be 10 pages a week. 10 pages a week. If you have a 5-day writing week, that's 2 pages a day. Okay, so we'll talk about whether you can do that, is doable or not. But the idea is that you have 4 research writing classes. That's 75 pages every 8 weeks. So you have a 300-page dissertation after 4 cycles, and then your 5th is a defense, an explanation and defense of your dissertation, which I'll explain here in a minute. So questions to ask primary sources. Are there issues in those primary sources not discussed? Does my argument match these primary sources? Can I prove my point? So when you read a commentary or a theology, I've got about 6 theologies here on my desk, because tomorrow I'm teaching about Satan. So when I get here in the morning, I have them out there. So I'm going to read what they have to say about Satan. I'm teaching about Satan tomorrow. You can pray for me about it. I need spiritual protection. The devil, I'm speaking about the devil tomorrow. What do you know about the author of the commentary or theology? What are their theological beliefs and backgrounds? Of course, that's going to be reflected in their writing, but if you know something about where they're coming from, that's I mentioned he's an Arminian, he's a Calvinist. You understand where they're coming from. What's the author's purpose? Why are they writing this? What arguments do they give for their views? Do you agree or disagree with them, and why? What arguments are made for and against your thesis in the secondary source? So you have your thesis, and then you begin to develop your reasons to argue for your thesis. Do your secondary sources support your arguments? Right, so you're looking at that particular commentary. Is that commentary for or against your view? If it's against, you need to maybe critique them. If it's for, you need to look and see what arguments are being given there in the text, in their commentary, that you could use in your dissertation. So would scholars agree or disagree with your thesis? Writing summaries and critiques. Again, this relates to your annotated bibliography, but writing a short summary And you're going to be doing that later on. And you're going to be doing that with these various sources. And explain the main points of the secondary source, how they relate to your topic. Writing a short critique. What do you like about this source? What do you dislike about the source? Where do they agree with you? Where do they disagree with you? Note or quote. I think we'll cover plagiarism and we'll be done tonight. We won't get through everything I wanted to tonight, but that's okay because I took a little bit of time to show you online. We'll finish this up next time. Next week, which is week 3, hard to believe, we'll be talking about using Logos in accordance. We get into talking about electronic Bible study software next week. We're going to talk about library, organizing your library. And we may get into week 4, which is the primary sources. We may start talking about the Hebrew Bible. So probably get into that. So note or quote. Summarizing short quotes in your own words and referencing with a footnote. So you find something in a book that you want to use in your dissertation or your proposal. You could write your own summary, but you got the information from another source. You want to footnote that using Trabian style. Longer quotes, block form. You don't want to have a lot of long block quotes in your dissertation. In fact, if I see that, if I'm one of your readers or advisors, I'm going to say, too long. All right. So use long quotes sparingly. Make sure you're referencing them. But here's the key point. Don't use someone else's words and claim that they are your own. Of course, you know that you're guilty of plagiarism, right? So what is plagiarism? The unauthorized use of the language and thoughts of another author and the representation of them as one's own. Now think about if you were writing something and someone stole your ideas and used them in a dissertation and then claimed that they were theirs, not yours. And now you understand why plagiarism is stealing, right? It's stealing somebody's ideas and thoughts. And of course, since we're in a Christian university, it's not something that we should be obviously practicing, but sad to say, there are people who do this all the time because we live it's easy to copy and paste and do a paper that way. But that's not writing, and that's not doing it the right way. All right, so how do we avoid it? Well, it's just one simple rule. When in doubt, put quotations around words and footnote the source. I mean, just make sure you're footnoting. And that's where keeping record of your sources is so important. And having the bibliography, the research bibliography, is pretty important. So how do we avoid plagiarism? Any unique term or idea used by an author must be placed in quotation marks, footnoted. So if there's a interesting phrase that you see that you'd like to include, but it's not yours, you need to footnote it. Any direct copying of an author's words or terms less than 4 full lines of text. Notice that, because it's going to be double spaced. If it's less than 4 full lines, you just put the quotation marks and footnote it. You can have it in the paragraph, double spaced. You can use double space, but you have to have quote marks and a footnote. If it's more than 4 full lines of text, that's when you have to have the block quote, indent, left margin, single space, no quotation marks, but you insert the footnote. So I should probably say, this is the block quote in Turabian style. When using but not quoting an author's words, terms, or ideas, quotation marks are not to be used, but footnoting is necessary. So you're not actually quoting someone, but the idea comes from somebody's book. You still have to footnote. So paraphrasing requires that you footnote the author's ideas that you put into your own words. Still, summaries come from a source, so footnote it. If the author directly quotes another author, I think I referenced this, you want to seek to find the original author's work and base your footnoting and bibliography from that source. That's the primary source, right? The secondary source is quoting the primary source. So go back to the primary source. If the primary source is not available, he didn't footnote, you have to quote the secondary source. But it just sort of catches your attention if somebody's quoting somebody, but he's not, the original source isn't footnoted. It is sort of like a red flag on that. If you need help with this, you struggle with it, go to plagiarism.org. You're going to find definitions, types, and examples there. Don't like to end on a negative note, so I got to end with a positive, but you don't want to get an F for the assignment, possible failing the course, have to meet with me and talk about why you did it, possible expulsion or suspension from the university, copyright infringement that you'd have to answer to legally, ruined reputation, and potentially the end of your academic career or ministry. Don't want to go there, guys, gals. Don't want to go there, right? So don't do it. Okay. Ask a question on the topic, find the possible answers to your question. I used to talk about this in preaching. I said a preaching method: ask a question, answer a question. Ask a question, answer a question. So you ask one question, you answer it, and you can do that in your dissertation, and that will help you again with your research questions and different things that you're trying to explain. And we'll get into more about academic writing. And what I'm going to try to do next time, in addition to looking at accordance and logos, set you up to get ready to watch some training videos. If you've not done that, this will give you an opportunity to learn about how to use the electronic Bible study software. So appreciate everybody coming tonight. And let me pray and we'll be finished. Lord, thank you for, again, all these students. And this is a busy 8 weeks as they start this whole process of finding sources and reading them and just trying to narrow down their topic and find their thesis and argument. Lord, I just pray for guidance and direction for each one of them. Give them the joy of discovery this week, finding sources, bibliography. Give them the joy of learning new information about their topic. And we pray that you would protect us from Satan's attacks, Lord. Keep us from the evil one. Pray that you would bless each one of them and their families and ministries. We commit our lives to you. Thank you for the privilege of studying your word. Help us always to see that as a privilege. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, thank you so much.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gromacki.
Thank you so much.